coming up next on The Health Hustle.
Find a couple of people who you trust and go deep with them instead of spreading your attention all over the place. And going back to one of those first points that I made is do not try to emulate someone who is, look at them for expansion, but do not try to emulate what someone who is at like $5 million, whatever is doing. Don't try to do the same products, the same strategy as them, because they have a different audience, a different size, and different resources. Like, you really need to find someone to guide you who's still talking about like 101 stuff so you can get started. And I think that I had so many freebies back in the day, Corey, because I was like, everyone has a freebie, so I'll have 25 freebies. Great. And it was such a distraction, but I was emulating people who were so much further ahead of me, who have huge audiences. So they need to have that strategy, but it's not that a freebie isn't a great strategy, but it just wasn't productive for this phase of business I was in. And I didn't see that.
What up, y'all? Corey here, and on this episode, I had a chance to sit down with my dear friend, Amanda Kuda, and fellow podcaster, which one of my favorite things to do is to bring on other people that have their own podcast show, because I think they just get it. They know how to talk, they know how to think, and they know how to do it in a concise way, and so this was a ton of fun for me. Amanda takes a modern approach to personal development and spiritual enlightenment through her lens of elective sobriety. Amanda's first book is officially out in public, and it's called The Unbottled Potential: Break Up with Alcohol and Break Through to Your Best Life. Definitely check it out. Some of the things that we get into on this episode, though, are what it means to be sober curious, when Amanda became exposed from her blog posts, the power of good intentions, what it means to be a hopeless optimist. I totally relate to this one. How she landed a book agent to be able to write her book, why she wrote the book in the first place, her personal spiritual journey, what it means to be passive aggressive, and if you're from the Midwest, you know all about this, landing her first coaching client, marketing lessons, what a gray area drinker is, and so much more. One last thing, if you're a health or fitness professional and you're having difficulties getting leads, one of the most common reasons that I see this is not having a well-defined niche. If you go to the link in the description, I have a free 3-step process that walks you through exactly how to get clarity on which niche is best suited for you and your business. Without further ado, let's go. Amanda Kuda, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Yeah, thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks, Corey.
I don't think you know where I'm going to start with the show.
Great.
So I went...
I love a curveball.
I went far enough back to see that you took a photo with Lori Harder holding her book, Tribe of something. I can't remember exactly what it's called.
Yeah. No, I'm losing it too. We'll get back to it.
Anyways, so you were a tribe called Bliss, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So was this like the beginning of you even having the idea of writing a book that I now have in front of me, or was it even before that?
It was before that, but that was one of the big moments of seeing people who I admire bring their ideas into fruition and actually interact with authors. Like we were just talking before we started, I'm from the Midwest, so I didn't have a lot of exposure to entrepreneurship and people pursuing their dreams. Most people like worked at a factory, a bank, a 9-to-5, and that's all I had an example of. And I remember when I was in my late 20s, right around the time I turned 28, I had a massage person who, that made it sound kind of sketchy.
Masseuse.
A masseuse, a body worker, is that what I would call him now, who introduced me to a spirituality book that I'd never heard of. I'd never been introduced to spirituality. It was Wayne Dyer's The Power of Intention. And I was living at that time in the Bible Belt. So everything was like very Southern Baptist Christianity. And he introduced me to this new form of spirituality. And from there, I started watching Oprah's Super Soul Sunday. And so I saw from there all of these people who were writing these self-help books and kind of started to get exposed to it. But it wasn't until I moved here to Austin that I actually got to see it in action because, people who do book tours don't come to Springfield, Missouri, which is where I was living, but they do come to Austin. So I was able to start being exposed to Lori Harder, Brene Brown, the, who's who in the self-help space who were coming here to promote their books. And I kind of was like, whoa, I want to do that someday. And that was really cool. Yeah. To get to meet Lori and see how she was bringing her ideas into book form was really just a cool moment.
Yeah. Because as I did some digging, it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt like you were more talking about this drinking not because it's an issue, or not drinking because it's not an issue type movement. I feel like that we're experiencing before it became like what it is now today. It feels a little bit more definitely not mainstream, but more so now than it did obviously 7 years ago when you started it.
Yeah, it was really cutting edge. So I stopped drinking on January 1st, 2017, and it was edgy at that point. Like I was doing dry January, but I'd never really known many people to do this. I had never taken a significant time off of alcohol because that just wasn't a thing people were doing unless you had a problem, which I didn't. And so I was out kind of on the scene blogging and writing, Instagram posts, but I didn't know that sobriety was something that I would end up talking about until I just kind of started peppering my content with, oh, by the way, I stopped drinking and this is what's happening for me. And yeah, I was kind of on the cutting edge of that. Kind of Sober Curious is now the name of the movement conversation. And I was just in the right place at the right time having that conversation, I think.
Did you feel that people were acceptant to it when you first started talking about it, or did you get some backlash from it?
It's interesting. The only backlash I've really ever received are from people who super, super benefited from the recovery portion of the community. And what I was talking about, just quitting alcohol because I wanted to live a better life, felt edgy and dangerous to them, which I totally get, because you kind of when you're in that place where it's life or death, if you are sober or not, you kind of have to pick a lane and stick with it. So I totally get that. But in terms of just the average person, no, I started getting people saying, oh, by the way, me too. I've been thinking about that. Thank you for saying that, because I never would have been brave enough to have this conversation. So thank you for putting it out there. And that was kind of the vibe of what I was feeling at the time, which is I think how I got momentum in my industry, is that no one had quite yet started talking about it in the way that I was.
Were these people that were reaching out and saying like me too, were they in the Missouri area, or where were these people located?
No, because by that point I was here in Austin, Texas. And so some of them were in Austin, but I think that at first I was really covert about where I was and who I was and what I was doing. I was just kind of blindly posting, and I was using like a pseudonym. I was using like a vanity handle on Instagram and on my blog. So I wasn't using my name even. And people from everywhere just kind of started saying, oh yeah, I've been interested in that too. Tell me more. What are you doing?
Was that intentional, or were you fearful of what people would say about it?
I was so afraid. I was so afraid. I'll tell you what happened actually, that I had like this cute little moniker that I was like moonlighting under, and I had been really intentional. And I have a background in marketing, so I'd been pretty intentional about not putting my name on my website or anything. And I thought that I could get steam and get my message out just by posting like beautiful memes on Instagram, like great quotes and things. And I had started to blog about being alcohol free, and this was late in 2017, late into my first year being alcohol free, and I had just started to date again. And I went on a date with this guy who I really liked. Like we're just vibing together. And on maybe our second or third date, we're sitting down to dinner, and he looks at me and he's like, "Hey, so I found your blog." And I'm just like, shit. And I was such deer in the headlights. I was so afraid. But then he kind of got a smile on his face, and I could tell that he thought it was really like awesome what I was doing. And I got through the rest of that date, and I went home and I looked at, and I could see like what his URL was, that he had looked through every page of my blog. And I had so much anxiety, Corey. But at the end of the day, what that did was give me a gift, because it ripped off the Band-Aid of fear, because the one person who I was afraid of being exposed to, who I was trying to make a good impression on, already saw behind the curtains. And so from that point on, I was like, well, screw it. Who cares who sees my stuff now? The one person who I was trying to impress saw it and thought it was awesome. So I changed all of my handles, changed all of my URLs, started putting my picture up with things. And that was kind of the impetus behind being a little more conscious and a little more intentional about starting a business and starting a movement around my alcohol-free lifestyle. So even though it was really awkward, it was a gift at the end of the day.
Do you know how he found it?
He must have just searched. He must have just Googled my name, and maybe like there was some meta tag that because I had purchased the website or something, that it put it up there. And
so Google figured it out, which in turn he figured it out. And then, wow, that's crazy.
Yep.
I've definitely found the same thing from content as well, is that the more openly you share, for whatever reason, like I feel like most of your relationships kind of get better, because it's almost like journaling in public.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So like you have to be careful. Like you can't just expose everything, but there is a side of people see things that you're able to talk about that maybe they wouldn't otherwise. I even think about that with my parents.
Right.
Like when they listen to my show and stuff, it's like I definitely talk about them.
Yeah.
So it does get spicy.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to be careful not to like go too deep or like get too gossipy or whatever or complainy. But I thought that what I was doing was just really being authentic and honest about my experience and my fears of what it meant to be a sober young woman in her 30s and how I was navigating that outside of the traditional bounds of recovery. And because there weren't people talking about it, I was kind of piecemealing my self-help journey together. And because of that, I was creating a roadmap at the same time. So what I was doing was somewhat unintentional to help myself, which is how we all start on these journeys, right? It's our own self-story that we're sharing with others to help them. And I just found that I was creating something that other people needed, but I needed it myself because no one else had it.
My favorite business owners, I was just talking to a buddy about this on a run this morning, are people who scratch their own itch. Mm-hmm. Is like, there's something very real and authentic about that. Is like, they had a problem, they figured out how to solve that problem, and then they kind of openly talked and shared about it, as opposed to trying to fill some market gap, which is fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but my favorites are always the people that it's like, I dealt with this, and so this is what I did about it, essentially.
Yeah, and it just so happened that me scratching my own itch did fill a market gap. So it was just really the perfect storm of wanting something, going after it, and realizing that other people might want it too, and that I might be in the forefront of making the movement happen.
You mentioned personal development stage of your life. Is there a book that stands out to you? Was there one that really had a big impact on your life, or one that had the biggest influence?
Yeah, I would say, I mentioned Wayne Dyer's The Power of Intention. That is the first, outside of I don't know how much of your audience is female, but what were the hot books?
Great, or...
like Chicken Soup for the Soul, or something really arbitrary or really silly.
Okay.
When I was in my early 20s and late teens, or He's Just Not That Into You. Those were the self-help books I had read up into the time, the kind of pop culture-y ones. And my body worker just threw this idea of this book, Wayne Dyer's The Power of Intention. And he said, Amanda, when I read this book, and he was quite a bit older than me, so he had this sage wisdom about him. He said, when I read the book and I started implementing the things in it, my whole life transformed. And I was at a point in my life where I was still partying. So I was kind of party girl, successful 9-to-5er, work hard, play hard. And I had just broken up with what was then the love of my life. And I didn't love my job, even though I was really good at it. So I felt that I was checking the boxes, but things weren't clicking. Things weren't matching up internally and externally. And I was like, yeah, I want my life to change. So I went home, I got it on my Kindle, and that book I've read and reread several different times. And I really credit it with, it was hard to read too. If that's your first self-help book to start in, I'm not sure if you've read it, but it's pretty dense. And so that one for sure. And then I think the other one that's really been impactful for me is Gay Hendricks' The Big Leap. And it's another, this one is a short, quick, easy, it instantly makes sense type of read, whereas The Power of Intention, I had to read it very slowly and reread several times. But they're just both books about the possibility that you have in your life. And up until that point, most of the books that I had read were a little more aggressive, and these were just lighthearted and feel-good books. And I really liked that. I liked that form of optimism.
I can resonate a lot with that aspect of checking the boxes. I definitely reached that exact same point in my own life of, you go to college and you get the degree, and I was married at some point, and I was living in downtown Minneapolis, and everything on paper looked pretty. Yeah. But from a feeling and happiness standpoint, it was very not pretty.
Right, just flat.
It was super flat. And the other thing too I wanted to touch on is that aspect of, I have found from a book standpoint that it's often more important the timing of the book than it is the book itself.
Yeah.
Is so often than not, the books that really changed my life, it's because it's the right words at the right moment. Not because the book was necessarily maybe something special or not.
Right.
It was just what you needed that time.
Totally. Yeah, because it's just profound to you at that point in time. And I truly think that books find you when you need them too.
Totally.
And I mean, I'm a voracious reader since that point. I just really have devoured so many self-help, personal development, spirituality books since then that it's hard to pick, but I would say that those are the ones that I recommend the most as well, just because they did transform my life in some way at some point.
Totally. Voracious reader and writer.
And writer, yeah.
Which we'll get into. But before we do, I want to circle back a little bit. Do you have any entrepreneurship in your family?
I don't. And I don't, but I don't not. So let's say it this way. I grew up in a single parent household, and it lived in the Midwest. So the Midwest is, you get a job with a good company, good benefits, good health insurance, you stay there, you stick your tush there, or you climb the corporate ladder some way. Not the corporate ladder, even, because I'm a first generation college student. So it's you just put in your dues, you work hard and keep your head down. And, I had a dad who was very enterprising. He always had great ideas, but there weren't always opportunities to fulfill them or to bring them to life. And then I had a mom who, my parents were divorced. So my mom always just really wanted to have a job that was flexible so she could take care of me and my brother. And she wanted to work from home, but could never find a way to do that. So I actually had the opposite experience of, I was afraid to be an entrepreneur because I saw, my mom always wanted it and she was always, struggling, working, multiple jobs at one time, trying to put food on the table. And then a dad who had all these great ideas but couldn't quite get behind them. So that was definitely a detractor. But the other thing that really benefited me, and another book that had a huge impact on my life, is right out of grad school, I landed this internship, which I took for free, by the way. No one would ever do that these days. But I was at an unpaid internship for a business consultancy based around a business book that was really popular in the 90s called The Great 90s and 2000s. It still really sells really well. It's called The Great Game of Business. And it's all about teaching everyday people at a 9-to-5 how to be a part of the business, how to read the business financials, how to read the P&L and interpret it so that you get bottom up management within a company, so that the people who are on the ground floor of, say, a factory have some sort of stake in the outcome of managing the business. And I worked for this company. I didn't know why. I mean, I loved the job, but I didn't know why at the time. But it gave me a reverse MBA that I didn't even have to go to school for it. I learned all about business. I learned all about financials and numbers, which, by the way, I have an English degree, so I was not interested in that. And I got a behind the scenes look at so many entrepreneurial skills that I never would have been exposed to. And I was at one point creating content, and I was a platform speaker for the company, going around and teaching seminars of how to run a business. And so I got this really profound experience in my early 20s that I was dunked into, what does entrepreneurship look like, even though I didn't have it really in my family, even though my family wanted it. So it was a huge, huge blessing that I didn't recognize until years down the road.
What do you think is the most important skill of an entrepreneur? And I'll give you a second to think about that, because you obviously, it sounds like, had more or less a reverse MBA experience of learning about it and seeing from other people, and then now doing it yourself. What would you say that would be?
I think that it is to be hopelessly optimistic and creative, because you're a little insane if you're an entrepreneur. You have to be a visionary. You have to see what it is, even if you don't quite yet know how to get there, even if you have to get scrappy to figure it out, even if you have to ask for help, even if you do it really, really messy and clean it up later. And so I think just this creativity and passion and optimism that it's going to happen and we'll figure it out along the way.
I love the expression delusional optimist.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like most of the time.
Yes. Yeah. You just kind of have to be I know this is what I'm supposed to do. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but at the end of the day, we're going to figure it out.
I always pair that too with just straight up resourcefulness. You're delusionally optimistic that this might friggin' work.
Yes.
And then you just figure it out as you go, because you have no idea what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
It is every day. So the book, this took what, a couple years to write?
It took a couple years from start to finish, from the formal, I got a formal book deal. So pursuing that, all in all, it went from mid 2020 to the book came out in October 2023. So yeah, it was a couple year process in the making.
Do you feel like it needed to take that long, or how would you have wanted to short track it? Why do you think it took so long?
It could have. But I'll tell you, if I would have just written a book and published it myself, maybe not, but also I'm a type of person who I work better with deadlines and structure. And so I wanted that structure of a professional book deal, but I also, in my mind, I wanted to publish with a publisher. So the way that a traditional deal works is, first you have to write a proposal. So you have to sell your idea to an agent and then to a publisher that this is a good idea. I know a lot about it. And by the way, I'm the personality to write this book because I can sell the book to an audience. Because by the way, if you get a book deal, they're not just parading you out in town. You have to show them that I have an idea, I can write the book, and I can sell the book. So you write this proposal. And so that took me, I got a coach to do that. So that took me 8 months. And
Damn.
Was that 8 months? Really? No, surely 12 weeks. Let's rewind. It took me 12 weeks.
I was gonna say.
And then I did it really fast. I was on point with everything she did. I was best in class student. She gave us an assignment. I completed it. So 8 to 12 weeks, let's say. And then
Were you straight A student?
I was not, but I'm really good if there's I have ADHD. So if there's something I'm interested in, I'm going to go in and I'm going to be the best at it.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And also that's a very high characteristic of entrepreneurs too, that they have ADHD of some sort.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you agree?
Yeah, no, I just think
Or did you just get distracted?
No.
Do you have ADHD?
I don't know. All I know is that when I was a kid, they tried to prescribe me Ritalin. And I don't know if that was because of ADHD or because I was just a rambunctious child.
Yeah.
But I do have a tendency to take on way more than I can chew and then just keep chewing on way too many damn things. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So you write the proposal, then you have to pitch it to an agent. And I had one agent in mind that I really wanted. I wanted the same agent that one of my idols, Gabby Bernstein, had. And so I knew that was kind of a tall order because I'm not sure I wouldn't imagine that you are in her core audience, but she's a multiple New York Times bestseller in the spirituality space. So I wanted this specific agent, and my coach had me pitch another agent before, and she kindly declined. And at first I was a little upset about it, but then I was like, no, you know what? I don't want you anyway. I want somebody else. So the way that pitching agents work is it's kind of like exclusive dating. You pitch one person and you wait for the response, and then you pitch the next person. It's very faux pas to like just mass pitch people.
Written or verbal?
Written.
Okay.
Written. So you do the pitch, and then she said, well, I think it's time. I think you should go ahead and pitch the agent you want, which his name is Steve. And so I did that. Heard back from him. This was late November. I heard back from them early January 2021. Got signed to that agency. So I landed the agent that I wanted. And then a couple months down the road, they kind of wait until there's a sweet spot in the editorial calendar. They start pitching publishers. So by spring 2021, I had a deal and with Penguin Random House, and then they give you marching orders to write. So it took me about 12 months to write. I had a 9-month deadline, but I needed a little extension. Took me 12 months total to write, and then there's the editing and the production part of it. So then there's about a year after you turn it in that they're doing editing and production. So it's a long tail process. It's not like, hey, I have this great idea. If you want to do it formally, publishing is a very antiquated, this is how we do it industry. So yeah, 2021 or 2020, spring 2020 to October 2023 is when it hit shelves.
Damn.
Seems wild, huh?
Yes, that is actually super wild to
Yeah.
think that you're going to spend an entire year writing a book. This might seem like a random question, but I am curious because you said you have an English degree, but I think more specifically public speaking, if I just say.
So I have my undergrad is in technical writing and my master's is in communication. So yeah,
Okay.
I did a lot of public speaking. Yeah.
Did you feel like there was carryover to your public speaking to your writing and vice versa?
Totally. And I would have considered myself a writer first and foremost, but hashing out my ideas audibly is actually how I got all the content for the book, because having people ask me questions, doing my coaching sessions with my clients, speaking the ideas into fruition is what made it easier to write the book, honestly, I think.
Were you recording those conversations or you just remember a lot of those conversations?
I remembered most of them, or I would, when I got a good idea, I would write it down, usually on a Post-it. So I had a lot of Post-its everywhere. It was pretty chaotic. But yeah, I just kind of started realizing that I started hearing myself speak the themes over and over. And I kind of knew, okay, this is what needs to go into the book.
Interesting. Yeah, I have found just purely from the experience of writing that I've had is that it really helps clarify my thinking, which in turn clarifies my thinking and speaking and etc.
Yeah.
And so like being able to have a, I guess, intelligent conversation helps a lot with writing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So now that you have the book out, now it's just pushing it to the market as hard as you can.
Yeah, it's continuing to talk about it and keeping that, if your business is a juggling act, it's like you're throwing another ball into the mix. So now you're trying to keep this other ball up in the air. And for my book specifically, I work with a division of Penguin Random House that does a lot of long tail books. So they're expecting increase and just steady production over time. So it's just constantly making sure that you turn people back to it. And it's another just piece of your marketing wheelhouse that it's benefiting my business, but I'm also having to do work to make sure that the book is being taken care of.
Would you do it again? Would you write another book?
Yeah. No, I've known since I was a kid that I was meant to write a book.
Okay.
And there's a whole other book that didn't make it in here. So I already have the next idea ready to go.
Damn. Okay. So you've always sort of been a writer.
Always, but I mean, when I was in second grade, I'm not thinking I'm going to write a self-help book on sobriety. I'm thinking I'm going to write like R.L. Stein or Babysitter's Club or something. But yeah, I mean, I knew after I started my personal development journey and I saw people speaking and getting interviewed and writing books, I just had this sense I can do this. Like I'm supposed to do this. And it took a while to get there, but I did it. I did it, and I'm going to do it again. So
I've heard you say this a few times on a few other episodes that I listened to about how your spiritual journey was really kind of what led you to being alcohol-free and then ultimately writing the book.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what does that exactly mean? Like your spiritual journey? Like what is that for you?
Yeah. So for me, it was, when I I really turn everything back to this moment. It was my 28th birthday when I saw this body worker the first time, because I remember I left and I had the mantra 28 and feeling great, because he was like a really good body worker and energy worker as well. And so I remember that day specifically, and then continue to go back to him. And I was just at a point in my life where I think that in retrospect, I was in the middle of like an existential crisis. I just didn't know why. I wasn't depressed, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't satisfied. And so I just felt this sense of like dread of like, is this all there is? Like, I'm going to work at this company for the rest of my life. I'm going to live in this place. And is this it? And when I was introduced to that book, The Power of Intention, and I also, like I said, I lived in the Bible Belt. So religion was one very specific thing. And it wasn't incredibly optimistic, by the way. Or it was optimistic, but it was like mega church optimistic. And that was a whole different type of optimism. And neither of those approaches felt good to me. So I was kind of like, religion, that's not for me. And when I was introduced to spirituality, this thought that you can believe in a higher power of your own understanding that you just understand is there to help you, it felt a little Pollyanna, a little out there, but it also felt kind of good. And so I just wanted to have this, again, kind of delusional optimism that there was something somewhere out there supporting me, and that everything was working out and everything was going to work out for the best and everything was happening for a reason. And it didn't happen all at once because I never had proof of that before. So as I started reading different spiritual texts, studying with different teachers who identified as spiritual teachers, it started to feel just really good to me, the thought of believing that you don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, that you can still be an ambitious person who takes action. You're not just like meditating and hoping good things will come to you, but you're realigning yourself with an energy of possibility and opportunity and love and fullness, instead of the alignment which I was in before, which is fear, competition, kind of pessimism. And just realigning to this other energy felt really good. And yeah, for me, it is, one of my big spiritual teachers is this metaphysical text called A Course in Miracles. Have you heard of it? Okay. It's kind of out there when you first get started. It's a very large book. It's very popular in kind of the new age spirituality circles. And it posits that there are two different energies in the world. One is love and one is fear, and everything is that. So love is optimism, positivity, possibility, abundance. Fear is negativity, competition, judgment, lack. And if you can get behind the fact that if you shift your focus to that more positive energy, you're going to create more positive things. You're going to be more positive. You're going to attract more positive people. That's all my spiritual process is to stop believing in these not very positive practices that I had been sold and that it seemed like everyone around me was operating under, and shifting to this other perspective. So it's really just a shift in perception is what my entire spiritual journey entailed.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah.
So the reason I brought that up is because I had never really resonated with that word spirituality. I never really understood what it meant, and it didn't really mean a lot to me. And it was always very, in my brain, I guess, tied to religion, which I've always kind of fought back against because I feel like that's more just fear shaming at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And until I had somebody on the show, Rachel Gibler. I don't know if you know,
I don't know her, but I know who she is.
And she brought to my attention essentially the way she explains spirituality, and I would love to hear your input on this, is like it's more just a focus thing. And she ties it almost to like your reticular activating system, if you're familiar with that. It's basically what you focus on is what you find. And that's like more how she, I guess, associates spirituality, is like exactly to your point of whether you're focusing on the fear or the love, like that's what you end up seeing more of in your life. That's my understanding of it, I guess.
Exactly. It's just, I think the cool thing about spirituality as opposed to religion is it's kind of a little more of, it's your own understanding. You can pick from the smorgasbord. It can be whatever it is that you feel best with, as long as, it's not weird. And it can be weird, but as long as it's not hurting anyone.
Sure.
And I think that it's just this empowering sense that you are tapped into also your own inner guidance system. So you're being guided from your intuition versus what everyone tells you you should do, which if I look back at those Midwestern versions of both of ourselves, we were checking the boxes that other people told us should make us happy. So we got the college degree, which certainly was beneficial to me in many ways, but I picked a degree that I thought would be monetizable. I picked a job that I thought would help me be successful. I picked, lifestyles and friends and romantic partners that I thought checked the boxes. And that's a box someone else created for me versus me listening to myself and deciding I can make a choice about what that looks like for me. And that's what I found. Surely I could have found it other ways, but that's what I found through spirituality. So
do you think there's people that figure that out sooner than most? Because I think there's like a degree of wisdom there as well. I think it's so hard to formulate your own thoughts and ideas when you grow up in a house with other people and you go to classrooms with other kids and you're just a sponge, right? So it's an interesting thought to think like, could you ever figure that out sooner? Or do you just have to like go through enough trial and error and get old enough, I guess you could say, to go, okay, wait a minute. Everything I believe was just dumped into me and now I need to figure out what I actually want, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting question because I think that you're a little bit younger than me, but in like our generation, we grew up a little bit more isolated. So you had your small community, and especially being from the Midwest, very very communal and isolated ways of thinking. Not dogging on the Midwest, like it's a part of me. It's made me who I am today. Totally. And I think that having that trial and error certainly helped form me into the version of me that exists now. Like I needed all of those experience. And I think that what we're seeing now with newer generations like Gen X and Gen Z is that they have the internet. So they're getting exposure to outside ideas earlier and faster, which means you're noticing they're more pro therapy. They are more pro self-expression. They are coming, they're finding their sexuality and their preferences earlier in life and talking about it. And I don't think it's because their family units, maybe they are doing stuff a little differently, but because they're being exposed to these ideas outwardly so that, you and I stuck in our little Midwestern microcosms could have had TikTok and Instagram where we're seeing all of these things and getting exposed to it at a much younger age. I think that there's definitely some cons to it, but look how much earlier people are getting exposed to ideas that help them like frame their authenticity now.
That's a very love abundance mindset that you have. I like that a lot.
I mean, they're also probably getting a lot of bad ideas too, but let's be clear.
They've gone down some dark rabbit holes as well.
But, yeah.
No, I agree though. I think I was actually just reflecting on the idea of more or less like the democratization of just education in general and the ability to literally learn anything you've ever wanted to learn on the internet, regardless of your circumstances. I would agree, has like opened up people's opportunities to, I guess, mature quicker and learn quicker and to avoid a lot of the pitfalls. But,
totally.
So growing up in the Midwest, I can also resonate with the fact that I hate passive aggressiveness. And so I wanted to just bring that up real quick because like, I love you, Mom, but she is the most passive aggressive person that I know. And there's a lot of people like that in the Midwest in general.
My whole family. Totally.
And it was one of the things that was like very refreshing of getting out of the Midwest. It was like, oh, okay, I don't have to like beat around the bush. People can just kind of be more open and honest about stuff. So
be assertive.
I want to know if you had that same experience.
Wow. Yes. Oh my gosh. But I didn't know it at the time. So I just went back. I spent 2.5 weeks back in Missouri doing kind of a little like localized book tour there. And I stayed with friends and family. And these are all people who I've known my whole life or known post, spiritual development journey. And some of them they've remained friends because we've matured together. And even if they aren't right in line with me, like we still have enough connection that's great. But I stayed with a couple of family members and I realized, whoa, there is something culturally happening here that no wonder I felt this sense of competition. I felt this sense of I was very passive aggressive when I lived in the Midwest, and I definitely could be a little snarky, and I think that there's something to like a snarky sense of humor too. Like sometimes I still let that come out because it's funny, but I was doing it more to like show off and be defensive when I lived back home. And I watched all of these different little communication things about a lot of people gossip super thick in the Midwest. And it just felt gross. Everyone, the way that we connecting is talking about people. Even, I went on a walk with a family member and we were going through her neighborhood and it wasn't like she was gossiping, but she just was in the know about everyone and everyone's business. And so she was telling me, oh, that's Jane. She's a da-da-da. She's remarried for the second time. And I'm like, why do you care?
Yeah.
And it was just so bizarre to see this as a pastime and as like a lineage that's being passed down. So yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately being in a different surrounding has really been impactful for my journey too, because it's taught me different ways and allowed me different ways to express.
Totally agree. And to the point too about talking about people, and this is something I've realized, this is just me talking about me in this moment, but it honestly kind of bores me. I don't love,
so boring.
I don't necessarily like care to talk about those things
Yeah.
for whatever reason. And this is just, again, my brain. I'm more interested in like ideas.
Yeah.
And like vision and like what do you want to do and how do you want to explore. I'm always like, I guess, future oriented.
Yeah.
As opposed to like what somebody did or is doing. Like I don't really care at the end of the day. But.
No, I don't know if it's by culture, or now I have a lot of friend groups that are, it's not a big community. It's like different pods of friends. And so maybe just by nature, we don't gossip because a lot of my friends don't cross paths, but I live in a bigger place. So a lot of people don't cross paths. Whereas in my Midwestern life, everybody had crossover. So there was like this little, always this undercurrent of gossip. But yeah, it's something that I realized too, as I started to develop, I had much less of a stomach for it. Like I cannot watch reality TV anymore because I don't want to watch chaos. There's nothing about that that's calming to me or makes my, crazy life seem, more manageable just because their life is chaotic. It actually makes me ill and I just can't do it. I'm not interested in it anymore. But when I was in the Midwest, and that was if you're in the Midwest, we love you. There's no shade. Like I love so many things about my Midwestern roots. Shout out to Missouri. And it could have been just the people who I was surrounded with at that stage in life, totally, but I just felt like it was like reality TV, gossip, see and be seen, competition. And I did not thrive in that environment, but I didn't know anything else.
Same. Yeah. I totally resonate with that a lot, honestly, is just getting out of that mental framework of like really caring about the reality TV type stuff and caring more about like how are we actually making the world a better place is honestly the ideas, I think, more often than not now. Quick question about you're a certified gray area drinking coach. What does that even mean?
Yeah, what does it mean? So in the spectrum of the alcohol-free movement, what we started to identify is that if you're like making a Venn diagram, that the people who qualify for addiction is actually a really small part of the Venn diagram. So it's like this little sliver of a moon over here. But because it's so intense, that's what we talk about all the time is addiction. And the reality is most people drink in the center of the Venn diagram, which is the gray area. So you're not every now and again, just a glass of champagne at a wedding or whatever drinker. And you're also not in the addictive spectrum. You're just in the gray area. You drink sometimes to excess, but for the most part, no one would ever question your drinking. And early on in my alcohol-free journey, I was looking for a certification that resonated with me. And there's this woman, Jolene Park, who she's kind of like the foremost expert on gray area drinking. And so I worked under her for a while to better understand that kind of archetype of drinker. And it's really interesting because most of us would fall into that category.
Okay, thank you for that hit of dopamine.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that statement is that I realize as a content creator, and you are as well, I love this expression of being like a dopamine dealer.
Yeah.
Is that when you just talk about interesting ideas, essentially you're just giving people hits of dopamine. But that was great for me because I was like gray area drinking, but that makes a lot of sense now that you explain it to me.
Yeah, it's definitely a more prevalent phrase in people who are pursuing sobriety because they're looking for a term to identify with. And if you don't identify with the term addict, then what are you? And so this term gray area drinker is kind of like given voice to people who want to identify themselves but don't feel comfortable with the addiction spectrum.
Totally.
Yeah.
I want to tap a little bit into your business now then. So are you more or less doing coaching classes, helping people in that phase of life where they're thinking about stepping away from alcohol?
Yeah. So I mostly work with ambitious people who are sober curious. And that means that you've started to maybe dabble with the idea of sobriety. You're thinking that it's something that could be really great for you, but you haven't probably like gone all in yet. And you realize that you probably need some support and accountability because even though ideally you could just quit drinking. If you're not addicted, you could. Anyone could just quit drinking, even if you are addicted. But because of the stigma around it and how socially acceptable and prevalent it is really difficult. So I started my coaching business doing just one-on-one work. Then I kind of transitioned into doing groups and trying to systematize a little bit to free up my time. So now I do very little one-on-one coaching. I have a hybrid program that I run where there's one-on-one component because I really do still love to get that interaction. And I think it's really helpful and to have that accountability in this space. And then I have some things that are automated that you could just take anytime.
Do you remember how you started or how you got your first client or what that looked like?
Yeah. I think, I was still working my 9 to 5. So I had that kind of safety net to fall back on. And I started doing a evening kind of cohort of women. So I had a couple one-on-one clients, and then I had a cohort because I couldn't, at that time I only had so many hours in the day. So I tried to really see how much I could handle. And so I had one cohort that met like once a week at night, and then a couple of one-on-one clients who I would take here and there.
How did they find you? Was you just talking about it? Or
yeah, just talking about it. I mean, I had by that point built up a presence on Instagram or through my blog, and most people were finding me through that. So I think I just pitched it on my blog. Oh, another thing that I did though, that guy who found my blog and then who kind of set off everything, he gave me the idea of, I talked about this. I was creating a digital product to kind of help people. And he was like, put it on the internet for $100. And before that, I was just going to give it away, whatever. And so I did. And so then a lot of people started finding that freebie or that resource and
they were
downloading it. Mm-hmm.
Because they were already following the blog. And then you're like, by the way, I have this course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
And so then I started to grow my email list. And I mean, I knew what I was doing because I have a marketing background, but I didn't know that I was making a business at this point. I was just kind of haphazardly going at it.
How long were you blogging at that point before you had built that digital product?
I released it January of 2017. So about 9 months to a year.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah.
And at that point, for those 9 months, were you just talking about the sober curious stuff?
No, I was doing a lot of personal development things too, because I didn't really realize that sobriety was the niche that it was until light bulb moment happened. So I was doing a lot of content on spirituality, personal growth. If you go way back in my blog roll, I don't think I've even deleted them, that there's, blogs on, conflict and lots of different things that I wasn't relating back to sobriety at all. I was just kind of blindly writing things that resonated with me.
Interesting. This might be a difficult question, but okay. So you were writing about obviously what you were learning, what you were interested in, people were following it. Eventually you stumbled upon this idea of being sober curious or being sober. Would you relate that at all as well to the spiritual journey that you were on and figuring some of that stuff out? Was there any tie over
totally.
there? Okay.
I think that there is tremendous crossover between spiritual awakenings and sober curiosity, because I think that when you start to wake up, you don't want to be blocked in any way. And what is alcohol but blocking you from your connection to your inner self, your deeper connection to the outer world, connection to the spiritual world. And I started that spiritual journey first, and I was trying to have the best of both worlds. I was kind of trying to be spiritual girl during the week, party girl on the weekend. And it started to feel really incongruent. I was like, I don't feel bad, but it just doesn't feel like it matches up. And it feels like I'm always context switching. I'm always juggling. So it just felt like I was in this tug of war. And at some point I had to decide, do I want to try and keep doing both things, or do I just want to pick a lane and get in it? And it was really scary to say, I'm going to jump off of this party girl, social drinker plan that I've been on for the past 12 and a half years or whatever. And I'm going to commit to this other path that feels kind of edgy and lonely and weird. But I felt so drawn to that spiritual path that I knew that alcohol couldn't be a part of it anymore. And it wasn't drinking less, because I tried that and that didn't work. It was, you need to be a clear vessel. That was kind of the download that I got, that I just needed to be free and fully tapped into intuition.
The expression I like for what you're talking about is bright lines.
Yeah, some more.
Yeah, you basically just like draw a line in the sand and you say like, yes, no, right? You just draw a bright line on something and you're like, I am not doing this thing, or I am doing this thing, whatever it is.
Yes.
Because it's so much easier on our psychology to just make a decision as opposed to being in the gray area of like, well, sometimes it may be, and under this circumstance, like, that's way too many decisions. Oh
yeah, mental gymnastics all the time about if I was going to drink, if I wasn't, was it really impacting me? Am I being too extreme? Should I really do this? What if I'm, I had all these questions all the time. There was constant chatter. And when I just drew the line in the sand of, no, I'm not going to do this. Whoa, my world opened up, because suddenly all my brain power was going to doing whatever I wanted. And I didn't realize how much brain power I was giving to being on this kind of teeter-totter. And so, yeah, it was really an impactful place. And I find that, a lot of people come to me because I approach sobriety from a very spiritual point of view, but I find that they're finding me also because they are spiritually curious and sober curious at the same time. And they're feeling like they need to leave one piece of their life behind to fully embrace the other piece.
Have you done that with other areas of your life other than with alcohol, where you just were basically like, yes, no on this circumstance?
I think so. I think it's hard to draw one that's as dynamic as clear as the sobriety decision. But there's this quote by, you're familiar with James Clear, right? Atomic Habits. So he says, the ultimate form of optimization is elimination. Nothing is more effective than removing the ineffective. And I realized that at that point in my life, when I was kind of on the teeter-totter, that I was trying to add in all of these positive spiritual self-help things. And at the end of the day, what I was trying to do is add it in so I could counteract all of the bad effects I was having from alcohol. So instead of trying to add, do more, be more spiritual, be more self-development, be more optimized, I just had this epiphany that, like, what if I just stopped doing the one thing that's making me have to work so hard in the other end? And so once I stripped that piece away, that most ineffective piece, then yeah, I mean, I think that all of those other things became easier. And so there's other things that I don't sleep with my cell phone in my room anymore. Like, that's a non-negotiable. It does not happen anymore. And the other things are very small in comparison to that one change, since it was so big and tremendous.
There's a quote by Steve Jobs, and he said, the ultimate sophistication is simplification. And I think it's a lot to that James Clear thing of just like stripping away the unnecessaries so that you can focus on what is actually important.
Yep.
So that's cool.
Yeah.
So moving forward, so book's out. We're talking a lot about it. Something I wanted to tap in real quick, because you said you have a background in marketing.
Yeah.
It sounds like the early journey was blogging, which eventually led to Instagram. Is the future is it just more podcasting? Is it more social media? Like, where do you see things going for you in terms of marketing and what's effective, essentially?
Hopefully having a team to support. I do have some team members now that do little things, but I'm also a little bit of like a control freak and control of my own voice and wanting to have things a certain way. But I think that for me, the most effective, I've received so much benefit from Instagram and social media, and now a little bit on TikTok as well, which I was very resistant to. But ultimately what I find that's working for me is a lot of people find me through podcasts. A lot of people find me through Googling something specific and reading something on my blog that just really deeply resonates with them. And then TikTok has now become a really big discovery platform. So as hesitant as I was to get on there, I've found that it's a really great place to meet new people. And so if I can then pull them over to my blog, pull them over to Instagram, pull them over to some of my more long form, deep, hard hitting content, get them on my email list, then I get to form this deeper connection. And ultimately what I found is after people read my book, because you get such a front to end deep dive into my viewpoints and how I show up as a teacher, that everyone who writes a book says it's a really powerful marketing tool for your business. But I've had anyone who gets a deep dive, hard hitting piece of my content, they convert so quickly. They're like, yes, we want to work with you. We're so excited to, do whatever in your business.
Do you think it's because you have the book?
I think it's the book, but there were a couple of blog articles and videos before that I wasn't super tracking really well, because even though I have a marketing background, I don't like to track my numbers, which I'm getting better at. I've committed to that. But there were a couple of pieces of content that would convert all the time. And they were always kind of esoteric, kind of deep dive. They were for intelligent people who have intelligent problems. And that's what I realized is kind of my niche is really, I don't do a lot of fluff marketing. My authentic voice is pretty like deep dive into things. And so I found for me that those pieces of content work the best. And that's what I like to make organically. So that's good.
I like that. I had a great conversation with my friend Ashley about that recently, about how, and it sounds like you also click with this type of personality where we kind of just like to chew on ideas and we more crave like deep things.
Yes.
I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Like the shallows just aren't that fulfilling to us for some reason. I think we're just wired a little bit differently. It sounds like you're that way as well.
Totally. And it is a little frustrating because you're probably going to have a smaller audience. Like anyone who, has those really deep thoughts automatically isn't going to speak to the masses. So it's a little frustrating sometimes when you see, and I think Mark Manson is really great, but like The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is like constant New York Times bestseller. And it's smart, but it's not the most brilliant, deep thing I've ever read, but it's an exposure piece, right? So you're getting to the masses and getting to expose to a lot of people. I don't think I could ever write a book like that. I think it's great. I've read it several times for like personal reasons and research, but it doesn't resonate with me to write like that. It would be like pulling teeth to get that voice to come out of me. So yeah, I I like to write and have conversations that are pretty deep dives that are below the surface. And I think that there are a lot of sophisticated learners out there now who want to have those conversations. They don't want to download your like quick fix PDF or do your sales webinar or whatever. Like those people aren't going to fall for it. Like those are still great sales tools, but your people, if you are a deeper person like that, they're going to want deeper content. They don't want your checklist or whatever.
I just wrote a great newsletter about that actually recently. I was out in Greensville, South Carolina for a wedding with my girlfriend. And we went to a gym out there. Greensville's not that big of a town, if you have ever heard of it. But and they had one gym there specifically. It's called Core 24, and it has to be the only gym in this town that's basically like more or less, I guess you could say, like your serious lifter.
Okay.
Like loud music.
Yep.
Lots of caffeine. Like very little cardio equipment.
Okay.
Right. Like there's very clearly
you're lifting weights here and there.
Like there's a vibe there.
Yeah.
Right. And I wrote this newsletter about it because like it reminded me of. Know who you're talking to and forget the rest.
Yep.
Is like, that is honestly at the core, in my opinion, like one of the best ways to just market is like very clearly know who you're talking to and then ignore everybody else essentially.
Oh, totally.
So I have a round of rapid fire questions for you.
Yeah, let's go.
So it's the first thing that comes to mind. Question number 1, what's your best business advice?
Find your voice and stick to it, and don't copy people who are at a different level than you, because you're trying to emulate someone who's at a different level of success. Like, look at them, but don't try to do exactly what they're doing.
I also would tie to that too. Like, it sounds like reverse engineering.
Yeah.
See what they did and then
see what they did a long time ago. You got to deep dive in them.
Yes, totally agree.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. This is obviously a rapid fire question round, but I totally agree with that statement because I was just digging into somebody that I admire a lot from a content creation standpoint. He's another like writer, deep thinker, Dan Coe, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it was like a lot of his advice that he gives, it's cool and it's insightful, but it's actually not that great of advice if you're starting from ground zero.
Yep.
He's been doing it for 10 years.
Yeah, so. Exactly. You got to keep that in mind.
Best marketing advice.
Be consistent and be yourself. Don't try to replicate what someone else is doing. Do what you think feels like most authentic to you.
I like that. Favorite part about entrepreneurship?
That I get to create a schedule that I thrive in and create a product that I'm proud of.
Agreed. When are you the most productive?
In the morning.
Who is your inspiration?
Probably Gabby Bernstein and Marianne Williamson.
You've said that name a few times.
Yeah.
Tell me one secret about you or something most people don't know about you.
Ooh. I mean, I'm pretty open book. Let's see. I think that one secret is I don't show my funny and humorous side a lot. And one of my girlfriends gets on to me all the time. She's like, you're so hilarious. I'm like, I don't think so. But I don't let that side come out on the internet so much because I'm always trying to like teach something. And it's one of my goals this year to like let that like more playful side be seen.
I actually agree with that.
Yeah.
For my own life. I enjoy, because I think I'm just stimulated more about the educational piece.
Yeah.
So the entertainment piece doesn't always come out. What would you change about yourself?
Oh, that's hard. I feel like I've really come to accept and love myself, but here is a very specific thing. I am so tall. You can't see this if you're sitting down. I'm really tall. I'm like almost 6 foot for a woman, and I have really big feet, and I'd like my feet to be like a size smaller so I could find some more shoes, Corey. This is very superficial. I'm like doing all this self-work. So like those things, I'm like, we're in line, but if there's one thing that's like inconvenient, it's having big feet.
Yeah, I get it. All right. Do you wear heels very often?
Not in Austin. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't care anymore. I used to be self-conscious about it when I was younger, but now I'm like, whatever. I'm tall. I'm owning it. But yeah.
I dig that. What's your favorite app or resource right now?
Ooh. I think Insight Timer. I think that's just having meditation at your fingertips is such a pro thing that can like snap you back into productivity, snap you out of a spiral, help you sleep, help you get your days started.
I have found, as much as meditation always seems to be the thing, I would think this is probably true for most people, that it's the first thing to fall off when you get busy.
Oh, yeah.
When in reality, it's actually one of the best things that is always that I could do, honestly, at the end of the day. Is because whenever I meditate, it's always like certain ideas bubble up of like, oh, I've been working on the wrong thing this entire time. Or like, here's something that I should be doing in this moment as opposed to some useless task.
Yeah.
That's happens to me
always.
Every time.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Totally.
When were you the happiest?
In recent history. I think one of the happiest days was I went to this huge hip hop festival in the spring, and it's like all 2000s hip hop. So it's like Nelly, Ja Rule, Ja Rule wasn't there, Busta Rhymes, Chingy, like all the people who I loved from my like heyday. And I got to see them all in one day. And it was just the most joyful, fun day.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah.
That was so where? Great. Where was that?
It was in Vegas.
Okay.
And I was sober the whole time.
Speaking of being sober, I'm also, I guess, what you could say.
Yeah, you're not a big drinker. I've never seen you drink or.
No, even at the wedding this past weekend, like I honestly, it's had to have been at least a year maybe since I drank last. It was never like necessarily a conscious decision. It was just like it never served me.
Yeah. And
so I just don't do it anymore. But I will remember first time I ever went to a bar, and this was the same time where I was like not drinking and really wasn't that interested in it anymore. And I just remember learning how big of a personal development experience it was to be able to go to a bar and did not have a drink and to sit with the uncomfortable emotions. Mm-hmm. That was like a profound moment for me. Because like, I'll be honest, I know you're very empathic. I'm like the opposite of that.
Okay.
I'm actually like a glutton for punishment.
Okay.
Like I love just like putting myself in super uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was one of them where like I was at a bar and everyone's drinking and I'm just like feeling like so uncomfortable, like being the sober one there.
Yeah.
But it was like a profound moment of like, oh, like this is probably good for me.
Yeah.
Which is why this is so uncomfortable in this moment. So anyways, I digress. Last question. What's your favorite part about Austin and you can't say the people?
Ooh, I think that for me, Austin has, growing up in the Midwest, living in the Midwest, it's been such an expansive place for ideas and possibility. I don't think I would have had the guts to be an entrepreneur had I not seen it happen. So yes, that is part of the people, but because there's so many people doing their own thing, it just became reality for me, which before it was pretend time because I'd only seen it on TV and all those people lived in like LA or wherever. There weren't people in my microcosm being entrepreneurs. So it didn't feel possible then. And getting to see it in action here has been really cool.
Hell yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Your environment affects you so much. It's unbelievable.
Yep.
I have one last question. Before I ask that question though, I just want to acknowledge you.
Thank you.
For writing an amazing book, for having your own podcast show, for pursuing your dreams and passions, for finding yourself in Austin, for helping people in that gray area decide to make a better decision on their life that ultimately leads to a better life.
Yeah.
So,
wow, thank you. Received.
For sure. Last question. Before I ask you though, what's your plug? Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me anywhere online at Amanda Kuda. That's Kuda. My book's on Amazon. It's wherever books are sold. So if that resonates with you, you can check it out. There it is.
Boom. Got it right there.
Yeah.
So if you were to start over from ground zero, your business, everything you're doing, even from a book standpoint, and you were to give your younger self advice as to what to be doing, what to focus on, like ground zero, right? Like you have no idea what's going on. You don't even know what an LLC is. Maybe you've never written a book before. What's maybe the advice that you would give to your younger self?
Find a couple of people who you trust and go deep with them instead of spreading your attention all over the place. And going back to one of those first points that I made is do not try to emulate someone who is, look at them for expansion, but do not try to emulate what someone who is at like $5 million, whatever is doing. Don't try to do the same products, the same strategy as them because they have a different audience, a different size and different resources. Like you really need to find someone to guide you who's still talking about like 101 stuff so you can get started. And I think that I had so many freebies back in the day, Corey, because I was like, everyone has a freebie, so I'll have 25 freebies. Great. And it was such a distraction, but I was emulating people who were so much further ahead of me who have huge audiences. So they need to have that strategy, but it's not that a freebie isn't a great strategy, but it just wasn't productive for this phase of business I was in. And I didn't see that.
Hey friend, thanks for listening to the show. And if you have any feedback for me about the show or any other guests that you'd want to see in the show, definitely shoot me a message. I love engaging with my audience and figuring out how I can provide the best value possible to the people listening to this show. Before you go, I only have one ask of you, and that would be to check out my 3 Tips Tuesday newsletter. It's 3 marketing tips every Tuesday specifically for the health and fitness entrepreneur to help them attract new leads. If you press the link in the description, it'll take you directly to the archive of all my previous newsletters, and you can decide for yourself if it's something for you. If you end up finding it helpful, you can just sign up for the newsletter and you'll get it in your inbox every Tuesday. Thanks again, and keep hustling, my friends.